This is Art Is, a podcast for artists, where we talk about all things top of mind for emerging artists. I'm Isotta, and I'm an artist. I make sculpture, and I'm currently really interested in exploring how making sculpture with marble, a truly ancient material, can get us as humans in touch with deep geologic time. I'll be sharing more about my practice throughout this season, which is a new thing for me, because I started this podcast back in 2021 as a recent art school grad, grappling with starting my professional practice in the pandemic and feeling very lost and alone. Working on this pod helped me expand my horizons creatively and intellectually. So here we are, 3 years later, still making the show, but now with an amazing co-host.
And I'm Lauryn. I'm an artist and a career coach for creatives. I help artists and creatives master their mindset, align with their purpose, and make money doing work they love. Lately, I've been working on my acrylic and gouache cake paintings, and most interested in learning more about the intersection of emotional well-being and spirituality, especially as it relates to life as an artist.
Hi, well, Asia and Lauryn, thanks so much for joining us today. I'm so excited to get to have this conversation and learn more about you and your practice. So perhaps just to, begin, could you introduce yourself and the kind of work that you do?
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me here on the podcast. I've been listening to a few episodes, so it's a great privilege to be on. My name is Asia Stewart. I'm a performance artist based in Brooklyn, New York, and I'm also the founding artistic director of PerformView, which is a streaming platform for video and performance art.
Very cool.
Awesome. So before we dive into PerformView and all the awesome stuff that you guys are doing with that platform, I'd love to learn a little bit more about your practice and the kind of work that you're focusing on right now.
Yeah, so I guess I like to say that as a performance artist, I try to physicalize abstract concepts related to race, gender, and sexuality as objects that can be felt by or worn on the body. So I create both evening-length performances and durational works, and those works can span multiple hours or days. And I guess as an overarching theme, I'm looking at like the afterlives of different forms of violence, including colonial violence and patriarchal violence. And interestingly enough, my background is actually, I didn't study visual art in undergrad or in grad school. I actually studied government and sociology. And so I think in a lot of my work, it's sort of fed by and inspired by trying those theories and trying to find ways to, interweave and inject those theories into my work in a way that feels a bit more tangible than academia. Yeah.
So I'm curious as far as like how you got into performance then. Like what was that journey like?
Yeah, I have also performed my entire life too. I guess I first started singing when I was really young and performed all throughout middle school, high school. I ended up doing a few different competitions, but in those days I was really approaching performance in a more conventional way. So theater, musical theater. I didn't go to conservatory, but I spent my entire time in college performing as well. And a lot of that training was geared towards more musical theater and classical voice and opera. And then when I went to grad school for sociology, I was studying abroad in the UK. And it was during that program I was sort of frustrated with the limits of academia and that a lot of the work was quite isolating. When I was writing papers and dissertations, the work that I was doing wasn't really seen by, the people I wanted to see the work and wanted to sort of engage and interact with the work. And because I performed my entire life, I basically made the decision at that point to return to New York and, commit full time to performing. That was back in 2020, actually. So of course I got back to the city, was doing auditions for like off-Broadway productions, Broadway shows, was having some success. And then the city shut down in March with the pandemic. And that really gave me the opportunity then I was forced to stop and forced to reflect on the work that I was doing. And I also realized that I was frustrated by the limits of conventional theater and the ways that narratives can be expressed, the types of narratives that are seen to be attractive to general audiences. And there was so much of my own story and my own lived experiences that I wanted to express and share with audiences in a very different way through experimental work. So yeah, just throughout 2020, I developed maybe 4 performances, got grant funding at the end of that year, and then really things snowballed to where they are now.
Wow. Yeah, so I watched on your website the performance that was done, I believe in Central Park, where
Okay,
you have a rack of
let's play.
clothes
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
and it was broadcasted live, I guess, and
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
you're putting on and removing clothes based off of what the audience wants.
Mm-hmm.
Can you tell a
Mm-hmm.
little bit about what that experience was like and what brought you, and that was during COVID too, right? That was during
Yeah, that was
2020.
2020. Yeah,
So like
yeah.
what was your inspiration for that and like what was the experience of actually doing that? I'm kind of curious about it.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So that was a performance called Let's Play. I performed that work in October or November 2020, actually in Brooklyn in Prospect Park. And that work was really born out of a lot of my frustrations and own experiences of uh, being in public spaces and having people try to police and ridicule the way that I decided to show up. So saying that maybe the things that I was wearing was inappropriate or was not properly feminized or was overly feminized or things like that. And I wanted to design a performance. I'm really interested in audience interaction and participation because I'm interested in having people feel complicit in the action that takes place and more responsible for what takes place, as opposed to the more like sort of passive experience that would exist in like a proscenium theater where you sit and you watch a work and you leave. And so, yeah, with Let's Play, the entire performance was guided by the wants and desires of the audience. So it was performed both live, socially distanced in the park, and broadcast live on Instagram and through a few other services. And so viewers had access to a Google form and they could select add a layer of clothing or remove a layer of clothing. I started the performance in like about 10 layers of clothing, and at various times I was naked for 10 minutes and people kept asking me to remove a layer of clothing and I had nothing left to remove. And then there were also times when I had, 40 to 50 layers on my body and it was so uncomfortable and to the point where my, motion and mobility was entirely limited. And there was that sort of other perverse desire of like seeing how far we as anonymous viewers can push this person to go. So yeah, it was really a really interesting experiment. And a lot of the feedback I got from people I know who sort of participated at various points as they felt this discomfort and that they didn't know what the consequences of their action, they didn't know what those consequences were going to be. And because they were so removed, because they were probably engaging virtually, they had no idea who else was participating as an audience member. So yeah, it's nice to look back on because that was a much earlier work now, but it's definitely it was 3 hours, 4 hours outside. And I think we had over 350 or so respondents or commands that were issued. So yeah, it was definitely something that I probably would have performed in that way given the constraints of where we were in the pandemic at that time.
Yeah, so fascinating. That's so cool.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really interesting to see how, like, already with that piece, you were already integrating the role of the digital into the work. And I was wondering if that's always been of interest, or was that like just because of COVID that came up, and then Perform View obviously is a digital platform that we'll get into. But yeah,
Mm-hmm.
I see that as a really interesting binary between like in-person events, but also the kind of course, like digital nature of our lives right now and how we
Mm-hmm.
see so much work.
Yeah, I think I was really interested in building in those constraints and not ignoring them in the same way that I think at the time a lot of people were creating theatrical works that were meant to or built to take place on Zoom. I wanted to build a performance that would almost be like aided by or facilitated by the fact that most audiences were sort of digitally tuning in. And yeah, I think also at that time I was really interested in the way that we as humans or as people engage with each other differently and behave differently because of the ways we're interacting with digital mediums. And so I think people, by and large, are much more emboldened to act or do things virtually that they would never do in person, particularly when they're relating to other bodies, when they're relating to female bodies, when they're relating to women, when they're relating to people that they can then sort of deem as other in a way. And I think it sort of gives license to behaviors and various types of violence that would perhaps be mediated or exist in another way in person. So yeah, I was really interested in using Instagram and using other sort of technical services to my advantage. And it was really interesting to think back on Let's Play now, because I did this performance more recently called The Body Shows Itself, that I've sort of been doing over the past few months, where it also relies heavily on audience engagement and participation, but it's in person and it has this element of touch and sort of intimate connection in space as well. And so it was actually two performances that are sort of circling around similar things, but executed in really different ways.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting to hear about that kind of the element of the audience's role and the kind of disassociation that the audience has, especially if it's like through a digital communication. But I was wondering what kind of like disassociation happens to you when you're performing? Like, are you entering like a persona, or are you like deeply like being yourself in like an authentic way, or like just I'd be really interested to hear about that.
Yeah, I think when I've tried to explain the difference, at least the difference I feel as a performer between like the performing arts and what I used to do on a more conventional stage and the work I do now with performance art, is that the latter doesn't have the artifice that, so like if I'm in an opera or if I'm in sort of musical production, I would be playing another character, another person, and would be trying to find ways to make that play feel more realistic or authentic or true to both me and also hopefully the audience. But I think with a lot of the works that I've done as a performance artist, it's really me in the work. Of course, that there can be various sort of gradients of the way that I show up in work, but because they all are sort of born from a really personal place and, you know, an experience I've had as a Black queer person moving through the world, or sort of me mining familial archives or community histories, there's already that sort of element of like truth in it. And then in the way I showed up, like in Let's Play, it was just sort of me there with my body, with myself. There have been other works, like a sort of more evening length work I'm producing right now called Fabric Softener, where I am, and perhaps because it's a work that's going to be taking place in a theater, it's an evening length piece, I am playing a character. The character's name is Laundress, but that character has also been constructed alongside, or like sort of is it like an alternate version of myself, if that makes sense. So yeah, I think I'm always trying to bring a real element of myself, of my person, of my body when I'm creating performance art pieces. Hopefully that
That's,
answers your
yeah,
question a bit.
that is so interesting because I just got the insight of like, the difference between owning your own business, that is something like I'm a career coach, so I am my own business, or an artist, and then having a corporate job. I used to be a wholesale rep for a publishing company, or, I was an art consultant for a gallery. And it's like I was playing these roles, whereas now, in my own more authentic like business that's my own, that's like me, there's this level of sensitivity that I didn't have in the corporate world because I was kind of once removed. Like I was still, it was me, but it was just like me playing a part, or a part of me. So that's really interesting to hear your experience with that, because it's kind of, I've I have like a level of that experience in a different way.
Yeah, and I think the distinction you bring up, Lauren, is also previously when you were working in various like corporate roles, your sort of the performance, the labor that you were doing every day, performing every day, was in service of something or someone else, and sort of their overall mission. And so now, as an independent creative coach and career coach, the way that you're showing up every day is you. And yeah, I really appreciate that comparison. Yeah.
Yeah, but it is like as I started my business and maybe you have experienced this too, like the level of sensitivity though, because there's this, it's like all I think starting a business or being an artist, like it's one of the best ways to uncover like your deepest insecurities and fears. Like they're just
Mm-hmm.
all brought up to the surface. And that's why I think a lot of people, struggle with doing it and struggle with staying with it because it's so emotionally taxing. And like
Mm-hmm.
there's so much inner work that has to go along with it. And not everyone is cut out for that.
Yeah, yeah. It's also, I think, really vulnerable, especially when I look back at some of my older works, which I think were, I mean, I guess my newer works are also raw, but there is a point where it's me as Asia becomes almost inextricable from the work. And so that's just a sort of a vulnerable position to be in, to be putting out parts of yourself, to the world for judgment and for critique and for consumption.
Yeah. So how have you been able to support yourself through that journey or deal with that and the rejection or disappointment or just the emotion that comes up, more of like the negative emotion that comes up through that process?
Yeah. I guess I'll answer this question in two ways. I think a lot of my practice for me has been really redemptive and healing because I'm looking at these various points of either trauma or some sort of loss and finding a way to build a work out of it that I can then share that is then tangible. And so whereas someone could say, oh, that didn't really happen, or that people can like dismiss your pain or experiences, when I have an object or when I have a time-based work for them to experience, there's less of that dismissal. Um, and so I think regardless of, and I've gotten to the place in my practice, and perhaps also just like as a person where those judgments matter less to me. It's more like just the fact that I can create and embody these pieces and put them out there almost as evidence. And then, yeah, I think in terms of like rejection overall within the art world and within my practice of, grant writing and sort of seeking different fellowships and opportunities. When I first started back in 2020, I was applying to anything and everything. And I took rejection really, really hard. It was almost like this little heartbreak each time because there was both this sense of desperation that if I don't do this now and if I don't get these things, then what am I going to be up to? Uh, and then also this sort of desire just to kind of like prove myself and have these sort of signals of affirmation, external affirmation. I've gotten to the place now where I almost view, I sort of have spreadsheets of everything, and I view rejections almost as like tokens in a way. And another artist has phrased this better than me and than I can, but essentially every year she tracks her applications and rejections. And when she has more rejections, she actually views that as a signal of success because she's put herself out more into the world. So yeah, I really view it in the same way now too. It's like, cool, someone else saw my work and I may not have liked it, or maybe it wasn't a fit for this opportunity, but here are these, 10 other things that I'm going to be doing this year. And that's great. And sort of what will be, and hopefully moving through my career in a more organic way. At least that's what I can say right now.
Yeah, there's this other coach that I remember. She had a jar full of beads, and every time she had a consultation with someone, she would put a bead into the other jar. And if she got a no, it would be a certain color. And if she got a yes, that they wanted to work with her, they would be a different color. But either way, she got to put a bead into the jar. And so doing that motion felt like a win to her. So I feel like that same kind of mindset of, oh, actually just putting myself out there and doing the thing, taking the action is a win in itself. That's really beautiful.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree. And as artists, I think there's so many things that we're coming up against, particularly in systems and places and states that, don't celebrate or often see the value in what, it is we're creating and sharing with the world. And so if we're getting up every day or, every week, and we have some time for our practice and for ourselves, and to engage in those things in a way that's restorative, and we're also submitting applications, like, I think that that's absolutely a win.
Yeah, it's amazing to hear the confidence and motivation you have. It's very inspiring. So thank you so much for sharing about that. And yeah, all of this like mindset element is a commonplace conversation for Lauren and I. And it's really interesting to hear, how important it is to, get behind those emotions and just share more openly about that. So I think it's really interesting, and I think it's really visible in the work that you do, and it seems very honest, and yeah, like it really draws you in. So I just wanted to share my appreciation for the work that you do.
Thank you, and thank you for exploring the work and engaging with it, and also really for this podcast. And I think you sort of talk about it each season, but there's so many aspects of art making that can be really isolating. And to bring together a community, to bring together even anonymous listeners, and to almost be cheerleaders for them, of reminding them their worth and their value and why they should continue. And I also think if we as artists don't see our work as valuable, how are other people going to see it that way? So yeah, props
Well,
and kudos to you both.
well, thank you so much. And speaking of the idea of, valuing our work and getting to appreciate and see our work, I have just been really enjoying exploring Perform View and getting to see just the range and breadth of performance pieces that are on there. And so I would love to, learn a little bit more about the drive behind the platform. And if you could like bring us into how it was born, that would be really interesting.
Yeah, so Perform View was something that I created with my partner, Indy Sanders, who's wonderful, ex-professional tennis player who has a lot of experience with technology and business, and really made this a reality. So if I rewind a few years, was working here in New York as a performance artist, and having the opportunity to engage with other artists who have a performance practice or interdisciplinary practice with video, and really recognizing that when we produced work, there was nowhere for us to share it with an audience. So there is, of course, Vimeo and YouTube, which are two platforms that are really diluted with hundreds of thousands of probably millions of other, videos and things on there. And so it's really hard for artists to connect with audiences who are intentionally looking for their work and eager to support their work. And alongside that, Vimeo, if you're uploading works of a certain size, makes you pay as an artist. So it's not giving you any opportunity to really monetize your work. And then alongside that, on the question of money and compensation, artists who work in performance are really rarely compensated for their work. And I think in the art world as a whole, or thinking about the art market, there's this general sort of conception, or I could say misconception, that performance practitioners, body-based workers, don't need to be compensated for their work. And so just over, particularly in the wake of the pandemic, I've seen a lot of artists stop working performance altogether because they can't sustain it, because they're not getting the sort of resources and financial resources they need to live a life that they know, the life that they want to live. So I complained to my partner, Indy, about these problems for many years. And Indy was finally like, well, why not create a platform that's specifically for performance work, that's specifically for video art? And so that's what we did with Perform View. We launched in the summer of 2023, so about 9 or 10 months ago in July. And yeah, I like to say that our mission is twofold, in that one, we're facilitating connections with audiences, digital audiences, and artists who are working around the world. And then two, also ensuring, really importantly, that they're compensated for their work. And I can say more about how that works later too.
Wow.
Yeah. I mean, so much to unpack there. And also for anyone listening, Please check out the Perform View podcast called Open Studios, which is excellent. I have really been enjoying some of the episodes, especially the episode with Lynn Liu. I just listened to and really enjoyed, and then immediately dove into her archive of performance pieces on Perform View, and have been really enjoying that. So thank you for those conversations as well. But something that's immediately top of mind for me is the idea of curating all of these different kinds of performance pieces, and what your approach has been to like thinking about, collecting and distributing such different kinds of work.
Yeah, well, I think originally we were focusing on performance, which is also in the name Perform View. There are so many different ways that performance can manifest, and that people can create performance. And I'm personally of the opinion that really anything can be a performance, like any action can be performance, or there are so many things that can have a performative quality. So when it came to deciding what types of works we were showcasing on the platform, we wanted to leave that really open-ended and up to the particular artists that we were talking to or working with. So the platform right now showcases a range of performance for video. That could also be documentation of what was once a live performance or live work. We have dance films, art films, and documentaries, and also video art, which I think is also ridiculously broad category. And then in terms of curation, what's been really wonderful is that so much of this project has been community-led and driven. And so I like to say that we have a community-led curatorial approach, and that when we first started building Perform View, I was talking to artists in my community and network, and then talking to artists and asking them to recommend me or introduce me to other people in their network. And so we really snowballed this list of around 800 or 900 artists who work in performance who are based around the world. And then from there, we launched with a much smaller group of artists. And I would say one of the sort of main questions that we ask in conversation is, does this work in its sort of digital form, if they were documenting a live work, does it still deliver the intended message, or does it achieve some of the intended goals that you had when you presented it in person in a more physical way? And then also, yeah, leaving it up to artists to also decide and share what feels most exciting to them at the time too.
That's so cool. I'm curious because I haven't been on there before. When you say cultivating like community as well, is there a way? So I would assume it's kind of like a Netflix type of thing where you
Mm-hmm.
can go on there and search for topics maybe or artists and then watch their videos. Is there any other thing that like sets it apart where as far as the community piece?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think the really key aspect is that artists are compensated for their work that they're producing on the platform, and we have a revenue share model. So every quarter, 50% of the money that comes in from subscriptions or memberships is split with artists. And that was really important to our foundation, and the idea that their work deserves to be recognized and compensated and valued. And then in terms of navigating the platform, absolutely. Right now, we have works that are broken down into different themes and categories like environment, mind and body, materials, and a lot of that also artists are choosing, where their work, should fall, or what categories their work should be in. They can be in multiple categories, and artists also have their own profiles in a way that you wouldn't see on, Netflix or Max.
That's so cool.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it kind of reminded me of Mubi a little bit.
Yeah, yeah. Movie was definitely an inspiration, particularly in the way that movie really brilliantly introduced an entire, globe to indie filmmakers and indie filmmaking, and really wonderful works that were being ignored by other platforms or spaces.
Yeah, I just think of like, well, what if Spotify had started like this, Because I feel like
Mm-hmm.
this is having a more artist-led platform. It changes the view of like how the revenue is created and shared. And so
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, yeah, it's just such a beautiful thing that you guys are doing.
Thank you, thank you. And it's really been something that has happened hand in hand with everyone who's on board. And we have artists now across, I think, about 25 different countries. And just, I think also because thinking about what I said earlier and what you both have shared is that a lot of this practice can be really isolating. So what is the sort of brilliance that happens when you are connecting artists to each other who are, supporting each other, championing each other's work, and just committed to extending and sharing this discipline that we work in, this sort of murky discipline of performance and video.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's also interesting to think about the the fact that when you go to an exhibition or a biennial or something, and there's a lot of video or performance pieces included, and obviously the duration of those can be quite long sometimes as well, and
Mm-hmm.
that you don't actually have the time or maybe even the bandwidth to actually like enjoy that and like be immersed and like be concentrated because maybe you're standing up and you're tired or
Mm-hmm.
whatever it may be. It's like it's really interesting to be able to get to enjoy that work in like the intimacy of like maybe your own home or like your bed, or have time to actually sit with these pieces, which is impossible to do in like a crowded gallery space.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's such an exciting opportunity because I feel like I've just every time I've gotten to see video or a performance, I've never really gotten to enjoy it fully, because of
Mm-hmm.
that. And and then on the other extreme, the what you were saying before about being in like a theater environment and like being, in like a crowded space and like sitting in a very traditional environment and how perhaps that doesn't work either. It's interesting to think about that the role of like the intimacy and the environment in playing into this as a platform to see this kind of work.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think, sorry, Lauren, you go first. I didn't want to
Uh,
interrupt you.
Yeah, I got this image in my head of, there's a lot of wealthy people that have these home theaters too, and like how beautiful it would be to experience in the smaller groups in these smaller theaters
Mm-hmm.
and some of these performances too, like with friends, and like how the potential of that as well. Like I don't know, that was just an image that popped into my head because
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, no, I think access is something that we've been thinking about from day one. And unfortunately, I would say I keep saying the word the art world. I'm like, what is the art world? But the art world at large is quite inaccessible. And if I think about museums or galleries, they've often just been quite exclusive spaces. Or if you're in those spaces, exactly the point that you bring up of can you be comfortable? Can you relax? Are there chairs so that you can watch these time-based video works? And often the answer is no. And there's also barriers just at the door of getting into, at least unfortunately, in most museums and art spaces in the US, you have to pay at least $20 or something around there just to enter, to then spend a few hours and experience work. So what if those gallery experiences and meaningful art experiences can happen in the home or can happen in association with friends, having a meal and watching work, or as you said, is out of being in bed and watching work, and just bringing making sure that this is something that anyone could access, with their phone, iPad, computer, TV, whatever it is that however it is that they want to tune in. Um, the other thing that I think that comes up a lot with performance too is that with live performance, that can't really be replicated exactly. The sort of experience of being somewhere in person with other people in the audience and the types of really intimate connections that can happen within a space. But alongside that, because performance is ephemeral, once the work ends, yes, it can live on within the minds and bodies of the people who were there, and of course the performers. But if you are outside that, or if you're living in another place, or for whatever reason you cannot travel in person physically to the theater or to the event or to the gallery, suddenly you can't access that work. You can only access some of the traces, maybe the writing about the work. But what if you can then log into Perform View and see these performances that are happening all around us, all around the world, and still have a chance to access some of those sort of the the beauty of the work in that way. So yeah, those are some of the things that I think about and have been motivated by with Perform View.
Yeah, I just got another image too of like people, you know how there's get-togethers to watch The Bachelor.
Yeah.
Like there's these parties, and like how cool would it be? And maybe this already exists too, where there's fans of an artist that come together weekly or however often that they're dropping, new work on Perform View, and then they have their little party to watch,
Yeah.
the viewing party.
Mhm.
And it's like you're making that accessible and in a place where it's like reliable too. And it's just like the inspiration that can come with that, the connection with others, like that is just everything.
Yeah, no, you're hitting on so many things that we've also been talking about as a team of like Perform View with wine and friends, or we've done a lot of in-person activations in different cities. So we were down in Miami for Art Week this past December, and then I was in Mexico City for Art Week there last month in February, and then we were also in Austin, Texas, only like a week and a half ago, and doing these almost like pop-up installations or I guess I could call up a pop-up exhibition where we have multiple large TVs and projectors showcasing work and introducing people who probably have never seen experimental performance and video art. And suddenly they can sort of sit down in a comfortable chair and just be immersed in the work. And yeah, I'm really excited by the idea of anyone and everyone who wants to be moved by this astonishing work and really visceral work, for anyone who wants that to be able to get it at home or really anywhere they'd like.
Yeah, it's so cool to hear about all these like imaginings of people coming together and enjoying this, and also, also being able to experience it on an individual level as well. And I think it's really unique and really exciting. And this may sound odd, but one of our legacy themes on this podcast has been, looking at technology and looking at how technology is shaping us as artists and shaping, the many art worlds that we exist within. And so, of course, in this last year, there's been a huge resurgence of conversation on VR and AR. And I was wondering, with the release of, various new technologies in this domain, like how and if that has like crossed your mind, and if you're like thinking that that could be an interesting avenue perhaps in the future to like explore, and especially when thinking about documentation and like the fact that you know, we've always heard about these historic performances, whether it's like Marina Abramovich or Yoko Ono or whatever, but like, how they've been re redone,
Mm-hmm.
recently, and like historically they've been like recast these performances, and just the fact that now we have the opportunity to like actually archive a more immersive experience of that. And
Mm-hmm.
if you think that that's like exciting or perhaps like problematic.
Yeah, I think it's really exciting to be able to leverage new technologies and to use those technologies to, serve our mission of disseminating artists' work around the world and to make that work really accessible. So on the topic of VR, when we were down in Austin for South by Southwest, when we did the pop-up, Indy actually had a Vision Pro, and folks or participants who were visiting were able to put on the Vision Pro and use it to look at some of the works in the collection. And that alone, even, works that weren't specifically made for VR, seemed to be incredibly captivating to the people who were coming by and stopping by. So I'm really, really excited, and I would say the whole team is excited by the different opportunities that those new technologies and systems and devices offer us and offer practitioners working in performance and video. What's also cool is that there are already artists in our community who are filming works in VR, creating works that are specifically designed for VR or XR or AR. So yeah, I'm really astonished by it and excited to see how we can, use those technologies to artist advantage, really.
That's awesome. Well, I'm really excited about it. I haven't tried the Vision Pro yet, but I'm looking forward to experiencing Perform View on there.
Yeah, well, it's cool because it does that work of I only really tried it once, but you can suddenly feel like you are on stage with the person you're watching, or it suddenly transports you to an entirely different environment. So, yeah, I'm really excited about what that can do in terms of activating a collection. And then also, even more broadly, what Perform View can do as, when it's utilized as a teaching tool or utilized in educational spaces of introducing people, no matter what their age is, to different types of art making. Because I think of like if I had known about this when I was in high school or even in college, it would have probably completely changed my trajectory of what I thought was possible. What can count as art, and the idea that anyone can also be an artist. I just think that, yeah, opportunities are endless with this.
So, for those who are like listening and new to Perform View, could you explain a little bit about how to access it and maybe even share, some of your like favorite performances for people to check out? And of course, people should check out your work. But yeah, anything that you'd like to share on that front?
Definitely. So PerformView is a web-based platform. So right now you can access PerformView online on your phone, on your computer, on your iPad or tablet device. And you can also, once you've logged into PerformView and signed up, you can cast works directly from your phone to your TV. We are in the process of building a TV app, so depending on when you listen to this or when you hear this, the TV app may already exist. And then it's hard for me to choose favorites because I've seen every work on the platform, and I also love all the artists that we have on the platform. So instead of sharing favorites, I'll share some of the more recent artists and works that we have. Really wonderful artist named Elena Victoria Pastor, showcasing work on the platform. And there's this one piece called La Venus de Tacarigua, which is really devoid of you will see hands and uh, enter the screen, but you're not actually seeing a person. It's this really incredible documentation of this clay sculpture of a pre-Columbian deity, an object that gets fondled and destroyed by the arms and hands of these faceless, unseen white men. And it speaks to a lot of the violence and destruction of indigenous native cultures through colonization and imperialism. At least that's my own interpretation of the work. We also have some incredible dance films from the artist Camila Arroyo, who just joined the platform relatively recently, and these really visceral ritual-like performances created by an artist named Benjamin Sebastian, and they are based in the UK. So a lot of work out there, and hopefully, if you're listening, you can find something that suits you.
Yeah, and as far
Yeah.
as for a performance artist that might want to get their work on the platform, how does that happen?
Yeah, so we have a submission form. So if you go to Perform View and if you go to the FAQs, you'll see a link to that submission form. Please submit. We're always excited to meet new artists and new people. And we have, an entire team of artists looking at the work, reviewing the work, uh, getting excited about the work. So that's really rolling. You can do that at any time. And if you have any questions, you can always email me, asia@performview.com, or find me online, and I'd be more than happy to speak with you, show you the platform, connect.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thanks so much for sharing that info. And I'll definitely link everything so people can access it in the show notes. And yeah, I mean, is there anything that you want to dive into that we haven't covered? I know it's been a pretty wide-ranging conversation, but I just wanted to make sure that we didn't jump over anything.
I feel like we covered a lot, but I actually would just like to pose a question to you both of how does performance exist in your lives? Or Isotta, I know that you are a sculptor, but I still view that practice to be incredibly performative. And there's also the durational element to that type of creation too. So yeah, I just wanted to sort of leave that open-ended question to you of like, how does performance enter your life or your lives?
Well, I guess I'll go first. Yeah, thanks so much for asking. I've actually been thinking a lot about performance within my own practice. Yeah, I make sculpture right now. I'm really immersed in a marble carving practice that has it's just about to turn one. I took my first course last year with an Italian master carver and have been obsessed ever since. And it's true, like marble in particular is such a performative practice. It's the work really transforms over a pretty lengthy period of time, and also the impact on the body is really intense. And I've never been so physically exhausted from art making. But yeah, I guess I've been thinking a little bit more about how solitary the practice is. Like I work in my studio by myself, and because of the nature of the process, it's very dusty and loud. And so I'm actually
Mm-hmm.
like in a sealed container of plastic. It's like a plastic cube. And so I really am blocked off from everyone else in my studio environment. And so I've been starting to think about perhaps doing some more documentation and video work to capture that and to be able to share that a little bit more with peers, because it is really like kind of a private sanctuary where I'm working. And yeah, I guess also from the tradition side, it's quite a traditional craft that is unfortunately fading. The average people who work in marble carving are pretty old, and it because of the intensity of the practice, it's hard to maintain for too long. But I love the idea that I'm with each piece that I'm working on, I'm preserving and also expanding and evolving on a traditional craft that's been done for thousands of years. And especially being Italian, I grew up surrounded by sculpture and classical sculpture and ancient Roman sculpture, and just thought nothing of it. And so now, being away from where I grew up and working on my own pieces, and having a different perspective that's much more uh, focused on like a kind of a geological element, and looking at like the power of stone itself, and thinking about marble as an ancient material that predates humanity and everything. I've been thinking a lot about the performativity of such a still and like secretive stone. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's really beautiful. Also, the act of like preservation and conservation through the work and the carving, the marble carving that you're engaging in. And yeah, I will be really excited to see if, when, and how you incorporate video into documenting that work. Or I also really like to think of performance, or I guess things I'm drawn to is like the idea of like the afterlife of something and the residue that remains even after that, physical action has ended. And so if there are also ways that perhaps even the byproducts that are produced as you're carving could be represented or shared too. Yeah, very cool.
Yeah.
Thanks.
It's so interesting to think about performance within our own lives. And yeah, I love watching those videos of you carving, and the ones that are sped up too, because it's not something you see every day, someone marble carving. Um, and for me, I'm not only a career coach for artists and creatives, but I also am an artist myself. So I paint, I write poetry, I I host workshops. And so, I feel like I perform when I'm selling, I perform when I'm hosting workshops, I perform my poetry, I perform when I'm painting, um, and the interaction that I have with people in those, especially if I'm in a workshop space where there's multiple people, I go into rehabs, and I work part-time for a nonprofit called the Vic James Center, where we bring evidence-based programs into places that people are struggling with addiction. And so I've gone into a youth homeless shelter in Venice too. And it is a very performative act, having to get people who may not want to really engage in these type of things to engage. And so it's quite fun. And I feel like, it's a journey of, like, as an introvert too, getting outside of myself and being more performative and being okay with being seen is definitely a journey. Yeah.
Incredible. I think I love thinking about those types of like everyday performances and all those spaces that you're moving in and between, Lauren, as a facilitator, as an artist yourself, as an advocate. Yeah, really wonderful.
Well, thank you both so much for making the time for this conversation. And Asia, it's so exciting to hear about the work you're doing and the awesome platform Perform View. Can't wait to keep exploring on there and to share that with our listeners. So yeah, I just wanted to extend warm wishes to everybody, and yeah, thanks again for joining us. It's really great.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, and congratulations on the newest season of this podcast.
Yeah, it's awesome. We're really excited. So going to be having lots of wide-ranging conversations, and would love to have you back again to explore the evolution of the platform and of your practice whenever you want.
Absolutely. Anytime.
Thanks for being here. When you have a moment, please leave us a rating or review in Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen, and email us at listen@artistpodcast.com. We'd love to hear from you. Our music is by Black Wonder Twins. And now, a final message from Lauryn.
Hey, it's your creative career coach, Lauryn Hill. If you're ready to find more fulfillment and purpose in your life and make money doing work you love, I want to invite you to sign up for a free coaching consultation. In this 60-minute assessment, we'll talk about where you're currently at in your career and creative life. We'll get clear on where you want to go and what your vision is, and then we'll figure out what's getting in the way of you making it happen. After this intake process, I'll share with you solutions, what it would look like for us to work together, and how one-on-one coaching can help you create the results that you desire, but you have been struggling to create on your own. And if you feel like you're not quite clear on your goals yet, or don't really understand what coaching is, that's okay. Don't let it stop you from signing up for a consultation. I guarantee that you'll leave the consultation with more clarity on your goals and a better understanding of the profound impact that coaching can have on the rest of your life and career. So head over to curatedSplash.com/start-now. That's curatedSplash.com/start-now, and click the free strategy consultation button to sign up now. Hope to hear from you soon.